Hello, I've just read chapter 23 of Coruscant Jedi Twilight, which means I am halfway through the book. Um, so we pick up where we left off with Jax and I-5 at the end of part 1. And Jax is just staring at I-5 in disbelief. He's completely confused. He's wondering if I-5 had glitched and said father instead of host. But he's also very confused about, I-5's body language. He keeps looking to have very human emotions, even though he's just a droid. And he sees at the corner of his eye that Larenth is also equally as stunned, and he realizes that he didn't misunderstand the droid. Um, and he starts to walk past, and eventually I-5 is able to winds up sighing and gasping as Jax walks past, saying that they don't really have time for this. And Jax starts walking off, and then he realizes that droids don't sigh or gasp, and he goes back over to I-5. And I-5 explains that his father had died avenging the Jedi, and that he died to a very skilled assassin. And he says and I-5 tells Jax that if to look to use the Force and sense, and he can sense, and you'll be able to sense if what I-5 is saying is true, which of course it is. And so Jax does that. He goes into the Force, and the threads start going through and surrounding I-5, and at first he just seems to be an ordinary droid. And then Jax senses that there is something else about him. Something that no, something that there was some unexplainable engineering. And when he snaps back, um, he just says to get away from him, and he storms off. Um, and then we cut over to Den, who's still who's still with Rocco, and Jax comes running by. Larenth is following Jax, and then I-5 comes, and then Rocco starts to get suspicious when I-5 shouts out Jax, and he starts to get suspicious that Jax and Larenth and Den and I-5 have had something. We're planning something, and so he has the Gamorrean guards block the way for Jackson Mammoth to get out, and I-5. And he starts to demand an explanation, and he has his Trandoshan Razor Blaster to the four of them. It says have them give him an explanation, a re a believable one, and he might preserve their lives. Um, Eventually, I-5 then raises one of his index fingers and fires it onto one of the mounted picture frames of now Hutter, with that some frozen light of the past. And Rocco is immediately alarmed, and he starts obeying I-5's orders, which is to, have his guards put their weapons down, and to have and to deactivate the droids and not to try any subterfuge. Um, and Rocco is completely alarmed, and he's also and he goes white, which Den's never seen a Hut so scared. Eventually, and then Jax, Larenth, and Den and I-5, they start going out, and I assume they get out of Rocco's residence then. And as it said, they turn a corner, and then they hear the guards droids from outside, uh, coming toward them. As I assume them outside the residence now. I think it is the Jakar droid. And Jax ignites his lightsaber and says that he'll hold them off, and he orders Larenth to try and find Bug Eyes. And then I-5 just says, "Excuse me," and he shoots up at the I think it was the Cerimasteel ceiling, and it starts cracking, and then he lets out a very high-pitched scream that neither Jax and the Larenth can hear, but Den can hear it. and it's he wishes he couldn't, but Jackson Lamont can't hear it. It's too high pitched. Um, then and as the droid rounds the corner, the ceiling collapses onto the guard droid, and then he's completely astounded, and I then they start and ask and sorts of order an explanation of what was that, or was it Jax? Yeah, it was dead. And I5 of course gives the explanation. Oh, he says ultrasonic vibrations along with the heat from my lasers, not even ceramic steel can withstand the combination. And then says, okay, that was quick thinking, Dennis admitted, but that picture thingy on the wall, that oh, they're in the turbo lift now, and the droids. Oh yeah, it was Labyrinth who said, um, who asks how I5 brought down the ceiling. Um, and the droid starts to tremble again. The rocks start trembling, and the droid's starting to get free. And I5 suggests that they get to the turbo lift, so they get in there. And then asks how they did it. Just read out I5's explanation, and then asks what the picture frames were. And I5 gives the explanation that they're frozen light. Um, looking at now Hutter's past. Um, and he goes into an explanation of he goes into a very complicated explanation using very technical words, and then just says, so if I5 was to have broken through the glaze, that they would have blown up Rocco's lair. And I5, and once they're up out onto the streets, I5 explains, well, not exactly. I would have blown up I would have blown up a few kilometers of Yam sector real estate. Um, and he turns to Jax and says, and is saying how pleased he is to finally meet Jax, but he gets cut off when Jax turns him off and says like, they just really do not have time for this. And he and Namath run off, and Den's a bit outraged that he just turned that Jax just turned I5 off, and he turns him back on. And of course, I5 is flabbergasted, and then says to him, oh yeah, he's definitely warming up to you. And that's where we end the chapter. You can it's very curious, this chapter. You really feel for Jack for about you really do feel for I5, but you and oh, something I forgot to mention when Jax was sensing who I I5 was verifying his story. He sensed that he did belong to Lorne Pavon, and Lorne Pavon considered I5 a person, not just a droid. Um, and I think it's really interesting how scared it seems that Jax gets after he looks into I5 and verifies his story. He almost seems scared. It's not explicitly said anywhere that he is scared, but based on the words he used and and his immediate reaction afterwards, it very much sounds like Jax is scared of I5 in a way. You know, he didn't say that we really don't have time for this and walked off. He says to now he says get away from me, and the book describes him as stalking off. And of course I5 pursues him, but you can also really understand why I5 is so sad and disappointed, because he's finally found Jax, and he doesn't believe him, and he doesn't want to give him the time of day, and he's being very dismissive to I5, and this is pretty much been his life mission for so long now. And with Jax, it's interesting how he does seem to be scared of I5 and how he runs from him. That it's a very interesting reaction he has. And I'm curious as to what might have sparked that reaction. because he was just verifying I5's story. He was just verifying, you know, what I5 had told him, which was that Lorne Pavan sent him, and we're told that at first it seems like a normal droid, and then he sees that he's got something that's beyond explainable engineering, which of course is him being more person, and he realises that yes, Lorne Pavan did send I5, so it really is a what's sprung this reaction on Jax. Now, it doesn't make... Now, again, the book doesn't make it clear if Jax is scared of I5, but that's the impression I've got from... That's the impression I got. And it's a very curious reaction. And it seems to be almost out of disbelief. It's definitely disbelief, but also... And they just don't have time. But I feel like there's something else in there, which to me it seems like fear, and you have to say what sprung that fear. It's very interesting. I5 again, he's... Okay, I5 and 10, they're just... I think that so far they've been the highlights of this book. And the way I5 just takes command of the situation when it turns south is absolutely incredible. It really does feel like, do they even need Jedi there to get them out of this situation when I5's been able to handle this all on his own, you know? So yeah, it's very... it's almost humorous, in a way, how I5 seems to be doing a more effective job than the Jedi. So yeah, I5 does also order for order Rocco to have the Jedi's weapons brought back, because of course Jax has a blaster. He might still have the two Bully Boys blasters as well. He also had a vibro knife, and of course Larenth has twin blaster pistols. So yeah, but it's gonna be very interesting, really interesting. To see how this is going to go now, because Jax also did bring up that now that Rocco is now against them, they don't have Rocco to help them get to Bug Eyes, so now they have to race against Rocco as well. And I think you can also kind of understand Jax's frustration after that. You know, I think it went from fear to frustration against I5. Because they were just about to have the assistance of Rocco, and now he's already double-crossed them because I5 messed things up. So you can understand why Jax seems frustrated and why he kind of turns I5 off. And also, I think it was also that part of fear that we saw earlier on of I5. And it's very curious. It's very curious. It's gonna be interesting to see what does Den and I5 do. Are they just gonna chase Jax and Larenth? Or are they gonna have to keep searching for them because they've ran off? Probably not very far because it's but yeah. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. It seems next chapter we're picking back up with Nick, as I saw the Far Ranger, which I believe was the name of the ship that Drock Coven and the Mock used. So yeah. Anyway, that brings an end to this review. So thank you all for watching, and goodbye. It didn't end, and goodbye. Hello, I have just read chapter 24, I think it is, yeah, 24, of Coruscant Knights, Jedi Twilight. I had Last of the Jedi come to mind, but clearly didn't seem like I was going to say it, so there we go. It hasn't been as bad as my Shadows and Mindor reviews, where I believe I kept saying Last of the Jedi. I'm fairly sure I kept saying Last of the Jedi throughout those reviews, because I had literally just come off the back of that film, but anyway. We pick up with Nick, who's in the Far Ranger, which I believe was Drock Coven's ship, wasn't it? Just double checking. No, yeah, the Far Ranger, yeah. It's his ship, okay. And he's in the Far Ranger, and he's making his way down to the Yam sector to find Jack's Pavern. He's set the ship into autopilot because he just cannot pilot at the moment. We're told that it feels like he's had hundreds of holes poked into his head, so any thoughts he thinks almost go instantly. We can't retain any thoughts at the moment. And we're told that he'd been given the decision of either finding Jack's Pavern and getting to live any life he wished, and being let free, or Vader would go and kill his Gosh. Now, I haven't reached that point, so it is a bit a Gosh. From what I'm aware, the Gosh were basically Nick Rostu's tribe back on Horun Kai or Horun Cow, whatever it was called. And they were his tribe, his family back there. So he's been given the choice of turning Jack's Pavern over or having his entire family killed and being imprisoned on Despair. And I was actually it really excited me to see Despair get mentioned because Despair was brought. Pardon me. Because Despair was brought up in Last of the Jedi. I believe that was where Lina Nowtri's husband was imprisoned, and I think he was. I was under the impression Despair was a project in that book, so maybe in that book series, so maybe it wasn't. It was a prison because it sounds like it's a prison world. So that's confused. It has confused me a little bit. But either way, it very much excited me to see Despair get mentioned because it was I've seen Despair and it's been mentioned in Last of the Jedi, secret weapons. So yeah, it was a moment of excitement for me. And we've been told, and of course, Nick has chosen to save his Scotch and capture Jack's Pavern. And he just puts his face in his hands. And that's where we leave off with Nick, and we pick back up with Jax. And we're told that he's having a whole range of emotions at the moment, and how he's really just struggling with I-5. We're told that he hasn't really had anything particularly against droids, but he also hasn't got anything particularly for droids. We're told that he went, according to he's a Jedi, he spent most of his time in the temple. And most of the time, there weren't very many droids in the temple. There were 3PO units and 3D4X units. I would Google them. The thing is, for some reason, Wikipedia's not opening. My connection seems very slow at the moment, so I'm probably at the moment to do Google searches at the moment. But it's not pulling up any page. It's struggling to pull up any pages, so I may have to restart my computer. Or I've been having internet troubles for a while now. Anyway, so yeah, with Twilight, again, he hasn't particularly got anything against droids, but to him they're just machines that do as they're told. And you can understand how one might get attached to one and treat it as if it was a pet. But the fact that his father considered I-5 an equal, a friend, and in their final days, and in Lorne's final days, a brother, it. How does the book describe it again? But as far as he could tell, that wasn't what the relationship between I-5 and Jax's father had been. Instead, from the brief glimpse Jax had gotten by following the threads, Lorne Pavern had thought of the droids as an equal, as a friend, and toward the final days of their association, as a brother. There was something decidedly unnatural about it. It seemed almost perverse. The thought of his father, considering a walking conglomeration of circuits and servos to be worthy of equal status with organics, was, to put it mildly, disturbing. We're told that he had known nothing of his father, and how it didn't really bother him. Now that he was older, that because the Jedi were his family, and he never felt like he was lacking love or authority or anything. And we were told that when Jax was young, he did fantasize about seeing his family and wondered about them, but he's not young anymore. He's an adult now. And we're told that then this droid comes walking into his life, drops this massive bombshell, and maybe it would have been easy for Jax to just dismiss it if he didn't follow the threads. But he did follow them and has had this massive bombshell. And he winds up just shaking his head and just telling himself, no, you can't let the droid distract him. What does the end of the chapter say? And to be brutally honest, he's also seen that the very suggestion that there might really be something more to I-5. Jax shook his head. This was something he most certainly didn't need right now. And that's where we end the chapter. And the next chapter we'll be picking back up with Dead and I-5. For Nick, you really understand the difficulty of his decision. You can tell he really doesn't want to do either. But he's been given a hard choice here. And we're also told that, Vader can very easily take out the Gosh. All it will take is a single Star Destroyer and his command. And we're told that you'll have no have no trouble and worries about actually, killing them. And so Nick's been given the decision of capturing Jax Pavan and getting freedom, or refusing, getting imprisoned on their spare, and the Gosh and thousands of Gosh, which is his family, get killed. And he has to live with that while he's on the prison world. And so you understand the toughness of the decision. You understand why he decided to go and find Jax Pavan. Because, he hasn't met, even though he knows Jax Pavan and he knows he's one of the last surviving Jedi, this is his family. This is his having to choose either between his family or, surviving Jedi that he's only met on a couple of occasions. Even though, and you can tell that this is definitely a hard decision for Nick, but I think for a lot of people, they would probably make a very similar decision to Nick, saving pretty much their family. And so you can understand why Nick made the decision he did, but you can also tell he's not happy about the decision he did make either. There's no good decision here. It really just shows the toughness of the situation. And with Jax, again, we're not necessarily told what the emotions they are feeling is, but we also get a little bit more of a look in how he feels about droids, about how, he doesn't really have anything against droids, but he also doesn't, he's also just not massively keen on droids. It is, to him they're just servants, they do what they're told. And so for him to see that his father considered I-5 to be a friend, Jax winds up referring to his father as having a mental case, which is, that I feel like that's a bit extreme, but yeah, it's very interesting how he's reacting. So yeah. Again, I'm going to also be very interested to see I-5 and then just going to follow Jax and Labyrinth, because they found them, they started running off. All they have to do is just try and follow them. They wouldn't have gotten very far unless they used the Force to enhance their speed, so they can literally just follow them, so it's going to be interesting to see what they do next. But yeah, it's interesting how Jax is feeling about I-5. And how, even though he doesn't personally like that his father had this connection to what's to him just a machine, he also notices that there is just something about I5 that makes him different from other droids, and you can see how that's really affecting Jax. You can see how he has these two, how he's feeling very conflicted at the moment. So yeah. Anyway, I think that brings an end to this review. Not really much else. There's not really much to say in this chapter. It's very short. There's not a whole lot to really delve into. But yeah. So thank you all for watching, and goodbye.